Alright, what's poppin', y'all? I want to hit you guys with a review on Firefly. So it's been about a week in, and I've had time to play her, try her out, and I'm here to bring you a personal review about whether or not she's worth it and her strengths and weaknesses. So first, let's talk about her strengths. First up, we have her damage output, and in the correct setup, she does plenty of damage. She does about 300 to 400k per attack, and if I were to take out the Death Shred from my E1 Rame and my E1 Firefly, it'd probably come out to about 200k, and that's still a fair amount considering that she acts like 2 or 3 times per cycle while she's in her ult. So there's nothing much else to say about her damage output. It's very, very high, and she's next to Acheron in terms of personal damage in my experience, and I think she's probably going to be one of the leaders in DPS for the next while. Next up, let's talk about how easy she is to build. So her next strength is how easy she is to build. You really only need speed and break effect. Attack percent is nice, but you're really looking for the other 2 stats. And this makes her a lot easier to build than traditional, speed, crit rate, crit damage carries. And another thing to mention is that her trace investment can also potentially be super minimal. You really only need to level up her ult, since everything else hardly matters. Her basic attack and her skill, it's just multipliers that don't matter, and you can live without maxing out her talent. And finally, her light cone options are fairly straightforward. If you don't get the signature, then the Herder Shop cone is just the way to go. Completely free to play. You can superimpose it all the way without spending a dime. So next, let's talk about how team building for her is kind of easy. 2 of her BIS teammates are very, very easy to get. Harmony Trailblazer is a completely free unit through the story, and you've definitely ruled some Gallaghers while getting Firefly, but even if you didn't, he's available free in the current event and probably future events as well. The only caveat to all of this is that she's also pretty reliant on Rame, a limited 5-star, since she synergizes perfectly with Firefly. There's a lot more to say about this, but I'll touch on this a little bit later in the video. So Firefly's next strength is how self-sufficient she is. The fact that she implants fire weakness on the main target of her skill, and the fact that she can do toughness damage to non-fire weak enemies anyways, makes it so that she's not as restrictive as characters like Shuei, who focus on break but rely on the enemies already being quantum weak, or rely on Silver Wolf to provide that weakness for her. And next up, we've got how she kind of got the princess treatment from Hoyo. She literally has a relic set and an ornament set made perfectly for her, and nothing too much to say about that. Just farm those and you'll be completely fine. It's kind of crazy how some of these characters get so much for them when other DPSs are just kind of left in the dust in terms of relic and ornament options. And finally, for Firefly's strengths, we're going to be talking about how her archetype is fairly complete already. Rame, Harmony MC, and Gallagher make up a break effect team core that covers pretty much everything the team could want already. Harmony MC and Gallagher could potentially get limited variants, but I doubt either are coming anytime soon. And if we were to get 5-star limited variants of Harmony MC and Gallagher, it's probably going to be version 3 and beyond, since they released fairly recently, and I doubt they're going to make power creep versions of them so soon. It's such a specialized niche. So Firefly's got a lot of strength, but she also comes with some weaknesses, so let's talk about them. So this is circling back to the point I talked about earlier. Firefly's team building is kind of restrictive. As I mentioned before, Rame is an absolutely crazy support for Firefly, and it's not actually because of her weakness break efficiency, like you might think. I've noticed that the break delay from Rame is actually pretty relevant, and in my experience, it's essential to keep the secondary targets of Firefly's skill weakness broken, since the characters on the side aren't necessarily always going to be weakness broken at the same time as the primary target. And another weakness of Firefly is that in terms of team building, she is very, very greedy. She takes away Gallagher, Harmony MC, and Rame since it is very difficult to make other supporting characters work, at the same level as these three. This means that you probably can't have two break-focused DPSs in the same, Memory Chaos, Pure Fiction, or Apocalyptic Shadow stage, but it's even worse for Rame since her usage extends, outside of break teams. You can use her on traditional DPS teams. And the final weakness of Firefly is that if you don't break, you literally do 0 damage. And this is pretty obvious considering that she is a break effect focused DPS, but, this just means that you could get stalled super hard by enemies that block their weakness, like Japard does in some of his moves. And ultimately, this just kind of amounts to the fact that you kind of have to pick your battles wisely while playing Firefly, since you can't just match the weakness like you do with other crit DPSs. You also have to consider, the movesets and stuff as well. So let's talk about the conclusion of all this. There's a lot to say about Firefly, and she has a lot of things going for her, but also some very, very visible weaknesses. The interesting thing though is that most of her weaknesses can be mitigated by planning out your account, since she struggles with having very specific teammates and hogging those teammates from others. Might be a bit difficult for those who are just starting out, but this is part of any gacha game to avoid slowing down your progress and progressing optimally. And obviously, if you don't care about progressing optimally, just play how you want to play. So in terms of pull recommendation, I think anybody interested in the meta should pull her. She is fairly easy to build, and she has that very low barrier to entry considering her team is also fairly laid out already. But despite that, she still outputs tons of damage, and it's super hard for any other DPS to compete right now. In terms of Eidolons and Lycone pulls, I would advise E0, S0 for most people, and if you're willing to spend the extra Jades and you don't have Runmei, just go for Runmei. Even in general, the power level of a character is much greater than an Eidolon or a Lycone, and in this case, Runmei's synergy with Firefly is too good to pass up. And the Runmei banner just so happens to run at the same time as Firefly. They work perfectly together. So take the hint, pull for Runmei while you can, and be happy since she works in Break Effect and she works in many other teams as well. So in terms of meta, I think Firefly is gonna be staying at the top for a very long time. It's very clear that the devs have some favoritism toward her, and I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to lay out the landscape for her to succeed in the future. And I'm fairly certain that we're gonna have a Jinglu type effect again, where every Memory of Chaos, Pure Fiction, and Apocalyptic Shadow resets will have perfect stages for Firefly and her team. So that was my quick Firefly review. Hope y'all found it helpful, and feel free to let me know if you want more detailed reviews in the future, and also feel free to comment if you have any questions, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. But with that, I wish you all luck on your Firefly pulls. Hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys later.